The girl on the doorsteps night after night. The small alien girl lay curled up on cold stone doorsteps. Her body shivered under the dim light of the moons. Her thin arms wrapped tightly around herself. The streets were empty, silent, except for the soft hum of neon signs that flickered above her head. She had no blanket, no pillow, only the rough ground that bruised her skin. Each evening she searched for a place where no one would chase her away. But every door she tried had been slammed shut. Every window closed quickly when her shadow fell upon it. To the people of the town, she was nothing but a burden, a cursed child, a mistake left behind by her own kind. Even her family had whispered that she was too weak to survive before abandoning her to the streets. Still, she tried to keep breathing. Still, she tried to keep hoping. But her hope was thin, as fragile as her bones. The girl had learned silence was her only shield, because speaking to others only brought insults and fear. Children once threw stones at her and shouted, "Go away!" Cursed one. Old merchants waved sticks at her when she tried to sleep near their stalls. Even kind-looking strangers pulled back in fear when they saw her glowing eyes in the dark. She had stopped asking for help long ago, because no answer ever came, yet every night. As she lay on another doorstep, she whispered to herself, "One day, someone will see me." Her voice was small, broken, but in her heart there was a secret flame, a flame that refused to die no matter how strong the wind of rejection blew against it. That night the wind was colder than usual. She pressed her face against her knees, hiding her tears in the folds of her worn dress. The fabric was torn in many places, and dust covered her feet like a second skin. She was tired, so very tired. Yet sleep refused to come easily. As the town grew quiet, she remembered the faces of those who had abandoned her, their eyes filled with judgment, their voices sharp like blades. "You will never be strong enough," they had said, and those words echoed inside her chest, cutting her again and again. But the silence of the night did not only hold pain, it also held questions. Why had fate kept her alive when so many wanted her gone? Why did her heart still beat with stubborn strength? Refusing to give up, the answers hid in shadows. Waiting for a moment she could not yet see, the alien girl shifted slightly, hugging herself tighter. Her stomach growled, empty for 2 days. She tried to ignore the hunger, tried to imagine she was somewhere else. Maybe in a warm room with firelight dancing on the walls. Maybe with a voice telling her she was safe. But dreams often felt too cruel, because they reminded her of things she had never truly known. Suddenly footsteps echoed in the distance. Her heart jumped. She had learned to fear footsteps every time someone saw her. It meant she would be chased away, beaten or cursed again. She pressed herself against the wooden door behind her, wishing she could disappear into it. The steps grew closer, steady and strong. She dared not lift her head, dared not breathe too loudly. The air around her grew heavy as if waiting, and though she tried to stay invisible, the stranger's shadow stretched over her small figure. A low voice spoke, calm but firm. "What are you doing here, child?" The words made her heart pound. Her body froze. She did not answer, too afraid of the next moment, too sure it would end like all the others. The stranger did not shout, did not kick her away. He only stood there, watching, waiting. In that pause, the girl felt something she had not felt before, curiosity instead of hatred. The silence stretched, holding more suspense than she could bear. Her lips trembled, but she whispered nothing. Her eyes stared at the ground, expecting the heavy slam of rejection, but the sound never came. Instead, the footsteps shifted as the figure crouched lower. Closer to her level for the first time, she lifted her gaze just a little. She saw boots worn from long travel, and a cloak that carried dust of many roads. And above them, eyes that did not look away in fear, eyes that held something different, something she could not name. The night was still, the stars hidden behind drifting clouds. The girl felt her breath catch as suspense gripped the air. This was not like any night before. Something was about to change, though she did not yet know if it was salvation or another cruel trick. Her heart beat faster, her hands clenched tighter around her knees. She waited for the moment to pass, for the figure to leave. But deep inside, a fragile spark of hope flickered. Perhaps, just perhaps, this night would not end in silence. Whispers of fear. The morning sun rose slowly over the town, spilling pale light across narrow streets and broken rooftops. Merchants opened their shops, voices called out prices, and carts rolled along the stone roads. But even in daylight, whispers followed the alien girl wherever she moved. She no longer slept. She only walked quietly, hugging the walls like a shadow. Mothers pulled their children closer when she passed. Old men spat on the ground as if to curse her steps. Some pointed at her glowing eyes and muttered, "Bad omen." Others hissed, "Keep away. She brings sickness." It did not matter that she was small, weak, and hungry. It did not matter that she had done nothing wrong. Her very presence was treated like poison. The girl had grown used to this hatred, but deep inside, it still carved wounds she could not heal. When she stopped near a food stall, the owner shouted, "Get back!" Cursed one. He waved his hand angrily, spilling breadcrumbs into the dirt. Her stomach tightened painfully, but she stepped away without a word. The people thought her silence meant shame, but truly, silence was the only weapon she had left. In corners of the market, voices grew louder. They say she was abandoned by her own blood. They say her kind feared her curse. No one will touch her, or you risk death. The girl heard everything, every cruel word, but she kept walking. Her bare feet dragged along the stones, leaving small cuts behind. The world believed she was dangerous, but the only danger she carried was loneliness. No one wanted to learn the truth. No one dared to look beyond the fear. That night she returned to the doorsteps, the same place where the stranger had found her. Her heart still replayed his voice. "What are you doing here, child?" She wondered if he was real or just another dream her hunger had painted in the dark. But when she touched the ground where he had stood, she felt warmth still lingering in the stone. She looked around, searching for him. The streets were quiet, shadows long under the silver moonlight, but he was nowhere to be seen. Still, something had changed in her heart. Someone had spoken to her without hatred, and that small act had become more powerful than the cruelty of an entire town. The next day the whispers spread faster. "Did you hear?" The human soldier looked at her. He spoke to the cursed one. Why would he waste his breath on her? The people's fear twisted into anger. Some believed the girl had bewitched him. Others said she was luring him to death. The lies traveled faster than truth, filling the streets with tension, and yet behind closed doors, some faces wondered in secret. What if she was not a curse at all? What if the human had seen something they could not? The girl, unaware of their secret debates, walked to the edge of the town. She sat by the river, her reflection trembling in the water. Her face looked pale, her eyes too large, her body too thin. But she also saw strength because, despite rejection, she was still alive, still breathing. A flock of birds rose into the air, their wings flashing silver under the moon. She whispered softly, "Take me with you." Her voice shook, but it was carried by the wind as if the night itself was listening. She closed her eyes, dreaming of escape. But when she opened them, the shadow of a man stood near. It was him, the human soldier. He did not hide, he did not fear. His cloak hung heavy with dust, and his eyes studied her with calm patience. "You are still here," he said quietly, his voice more curious than harsh. The girl lowered her head, waiting for the usual insult to follow, but it never came. Instead, the soldier looked around at the silent town, then back at her. "Why do they fear you?" he asked. Her lips parted, but no words escaped. How could she explain years of rejection in a single breath? How could she tell him she had been cursed not by sickness, but by the cruelty of her kin? So she only whispered, "Because they do not see me." The soldier's brow tightened. For a moment the night seemed to hold its breath. Then he crouched down beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. He did not touch her, but his nearness itself was something no one else had dared to give. The girl's heart raced, her fear and hope mixing together. Was he different? Or would he also turn away once he heard the stories? She stayed silent, waiting, and in that waiting, suspense grew stronger. Above them, the stars finally broke through the clouds. The river reflected their light like silver fire. The human's eyes lifted to the sky, then back to her. "I do not believe whispers," he said firmly. Those words cracked something inside her. Her chest ached as if holding back tears too heavy to keep. For the first time, someone had chosen not to trust the lies. For the first time, she felt seen, not cursed. The night closed in around them, but instead of fear, a fragile thread of trust began to form. And though the town would not forgive her, though danger circled closer, the story of the alien girl and the human soldier had only just begun. A human appears. The town was restless that evening. Lanterns flickered outside shops, and people gathered in groups, whispering about the cursed girl and the strange human who had dared to speak to her. Suspicion filled the air like smoke, thick and heavy. But the girl did not hear their words, for she was far away from the crowd. Sitting once again on the cold steps that had become her only home, her body ached from hunger. Her skin was marked with bruises of countless rejections. Yet her thoughts did not linger on pain. They circled around the memory of the soldier's eyes that had looked at her without disgust. It felt unreal, a moment she replayed again and again, as if holding it would keep her alive for another night. Suddenly, the sound of boots echoed down the empty street. The girl's body stiffened, fear rising in her chest. Footsteps had always meant danger, always meant rejection, but these steps were steady, familiar, and soon the shadow of the soldier stretched across the stone ground. He stopped in front of her without a word. For a long moment, silence wrapped around them both, broken only by the distant cry of a night bird. The girl kept her head low, not daring to look up. She expected him to walk past, to vanish like a fading dream, but he crouched slowly, lowering himself to her level. "I see you again," he said quietly. The girl's breath caught. Her hands tightened around her knees. Why had he returned? Why did he speak again when everyone else turned away? Her lips trembled, but no sound escaped. The soldier studied her carefully, not with suspicion, but with patience. "You are afraid," he continued, his voice calm. "But I am not here to harm you." His words hung in the air, carrying a weight she had never felt before, assurance instead of warning. She lifted her head just enough to see his face in the dim lantern glow. Dust clung to his cloak, scars marked his jaw. But his eyes were steady. They did not carry fear. They carried a question. And for the first time she found herself wanting to answer. "They say I am cursed," she whispered at last, her voice cracked like dry wood. The soldier tilted his head, his gaze unwavering. "And do you believe them?" he asked. The question struck her deeply. Did she believe the whispers? Did she believe the cruel words that had followed her since birth? She had never asked herself that before, because the world's judgment had always been louder than her own heart. I do not know," she admitted softly. The soldier nodded slowly, as if her answer carried more truth than any denial. "Then perhaps it is not you who are cursed," he said, "but those who choose to fear without reason." The girl's chest tightened. Her eyes stung with unshed tears. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever placed blame anywhere but on her. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a piece of dried bread. He offered it to her without hesitation. Her hands shook as she reached for it, expecting him to pull away at the last moment, but he did not. His hand remained steady until the bread rested in her palms. She stared at it as though it were treasure. Her throat burned with hunger. Yet it was not the food alone that made her heart race. It was the fact that someone had given without taking. Someone had offered without hatred. She ate slowly, tears mixing with each bite. The soldier did not speak. He only sat beside her on the steps. His presence alone was louder than words. For the girl, silence had always meant rejection. But tonight silence felt like protection. The town might whisper, the world might hate. But in that small moment, she was not alone. As the night deepened, the soldier finally rose to his feet. The girl's heart sank, fearing he would never return. But before walking away, he looked down at her and said, "I will see you again." The words were simple, yet they held a promise she had never heard before. When he disappeared into the shadows, the girl pressed her hands against her chest. Her heart pounded wildly, not from fear but from something new, something fragile hope. For the first time in her life, she believed that maybe tomorrow would not be the same as yesterday. But the town was watching from hidden windows. Eyes followed the soldier's movements. From dark alleys, whispers twisted into sharper lies. "He speaks to the cursed one," they said. "He will bring ruin upon us all." The girl did not know of the storm building behind her back. She only knew that one human had seen her, spoken to her, fed her. That small kindness had become her shield against the world. And though she still sat on the same cold doorstep, her story had already begun to change. The night air carried a promise, and somewhere deep inside, she knew that destiny had finally placed her path beside his. What that path would bring, safety, danger, or both, remained hidden in the shadows waiting ahead. The invitation, the night was heavy with silence. Clouds drifted across the sky, hiding the stars, leaving the streets in dim half-light. The alien girl sat once again on the cold steps, her arms wrapped tightly around her thin frame. But tonight her heart beat faster because she remembered his words. "I will see you again." She did not know if promises were real. She had never been given one before. Her life had been filled only with rejection. Doors closing, hands pushing, voices cursing, and yet, a human soldier had spoken differently. A small voice inside her whispered that he would return, though fear argued louder that he would not. Then from the darkness, steady footsteps broke the silence. Her eyes widened, her breath caught, and there he was, walking toward her with the same calm strength. He carried a small bundle in one hand and a lantern in the other. When the light fell across his face, the girl felt a strange warmth she did not understand. "You are still here," he said softly. As if he already knew the answer, she lowered her head, unable to hold his gaze for long. "Yes," she whispered, her voice small but steady. He placed the lantern on the ground, its glow pushing back the shadows, and sat beside her once more. From the bundle, he pulled out bread and a flask of water. He handed them to her without hesitation. Her fingers trembled as she accepted the gift, her hunger clawing at her stomach. But even stronger than hunger was the ache in her chest, the ache of being seen. As she ate, the soldier watched the street around them. The town was quiet, but behind closed shutters, he could feel the weight of hidden eyes. People were afraid, whispering about curses, spreading lies. He had fought in wars. He had seen monsters, and this child was neither. She was only alone, unwanted and forgotten. When she finished, she looked at him carefully, afraid to speak. He met her eyes and said, "You cannot keep living on these steps." Her body stiffened. The words cut into her because she had no other place to go. She lowered her head, expecting him to tell her to leave, to disappear. But his next words struck like lightning in the silence. "Come inside," he said, his voice firm but gentle. Her breath caught. She stared at him in disbelief. No one had ever opened a door to her. No one had ever invited her in. Her lips trembled. She shook her head, unable to believe. "They will hate you," she whispered. "They will curse you like they curse me." The soldier's eyes narrowed, his voice steady. "Let them hate, let them curse. It changes nothing." He stood and reached out his hand to her. "Come inside, and stay forever," he said. The words were more than an invitation. They were a promise, a shield, a home she had never known. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break her ribs. She hesitated, her body frozen between fear and hope. What if he was lying? What if he pushed her out after one night? What if this was another cruel trick? But the warmth in his voice, the strength in his eyes, told her otherwise for the first time. She felt a choice was hers to make. Slowly, she reached out her hand. Her fingers touched his palm, rough with scars yet steady. He pulled her gently to her feet, guiding her toward the small house at the edge of the street. Her legs felt weak, but each step carried more courage than the last. When the door opened, light spilled into the night. She froze at the threshold, her heart screaming that she did not belong. But the soldier looked at her and nodded firmly. "You belong here more than the cold outside," he said. She stepped forward, her bare feet touching the wooden floor. Warmth wrapped around her body, chasing away the chill of the streets. The house was small, simple, but to her it was a palace. For the first time in her life, she was not standing outside a door. She was inside. Her chest tightened, tears filled her eyes. But she held them back, she whispered, almost too softly to hear. "Why?" The soldier looked at her with calm strength. "Because you deserve to be seen," he replied. The words struck deeper than any wound. She pressed her hands against her chest, feeling the beat of her heart. It was no longer beating in fear, it was beating in hope. And in that moment, she realized she had crossed more than a doorway. She had crossed into a new life. Outside, the town would not forgive. Whispers would grow into shouts, fear into anger. But inside this house, she had been given something greater than food or warmth. She had been given a place to exist. The soldier closed the door firmly, shutting out the cold and the watching eyes. The girl sank to her knees, overwhelmed by the simple gift of safety. And though she still trembled with doubt, the voice of rejection was finally drowned out by a stronger one. "You are home now," the soldier said, and this time she believed. Inside the warmth, the door closed behind her with a soft thud. For a moment, the alien girl stood frozen, her back against the wood as if she feared it would swing open again and throw her back into the cold. Her eyes scanned the room in silence, the flicker of firelight painting the walls in soft orange glow. It was not a palace, not grand or filled with treasure, but to her it felt impossible. The small house smelled of bread and smoke. A wooden table stood at the center, 2 chairs beside it, There was a bed in the corner, covered with a blanket worn but clean. Every detail struck her as unreal. Because for the first time in her life, she was not outside looking in. The soldier watched her carefully, his eyes steady. "You can sit," he said, motioning toward the chair, but she shook her head. Unsure if she had the right, her body pressed against the wall, ready to run at the smallest sign of rejection. He did not force her. He simply moved to the fire and placed more wood on the flames. The crackle of burning logs filled the silence. Slowly, the warmth spread across the room, touching her chilled skin like a gentle hand. Her body wanted to believe she was safe, but her mind still whispered old fears. What if he changed his mind? What if he woke tomorrow and cast her out like the others? Her kin had once given her shelter, then abandoned her without warning. Why should this human be any different? The soldier placed a bowl of soup on the table. The steam rose gently, carrying the smell of herbs. He did not push it toward her, he only said, "When you are ready." His voice was calm, without demand, and that patience unsettled her more than anger ever could. Her stomach growled loudly, betraying her hunger. She lowered her eyes in shame, but the soldier only nodded. "Food is meant to be eaten," he said, "not feared." The words seemed strange, yet comforting. At last she stepped closer, her bare feet whispering across the wooden floor. Her hand shook as she reached for the bowl. The first sip burned her tongue, but she swallowed quickly. Unable to stop, tears filled her eyes, not from pain, but from the kindness she could not understand. When the bowl was empty, she whispered, "Why do you help me?" The soldier leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady on the fire. "Because no one else would," he replied. His answer was simple, but it carried a weight that pressed against her chest. The girl wanted to ask more, wanted to know why he had chosen her, but her voice failed her. She sat in silence, her thin fingers clutching the edge of the bowl as if it might vanish. The soldier let the quiet remain, as though he knew she needed space to breathe. Later, when the fire dimmed, he stood and pulled another blanket from the chest. He laid it gently on the bed and said, "You will sleep here." The girl stiffened, shaking her head quickly. "No, I will sleep on the floor," she whispered, her voice sharp with fear. The soldier frowned slightly, not in anger but in sadness. "You have slept on stones long enough," he said. "This bed will not curse you." But still she refused. Curling on the floor near the hearth, her body could not trust comfort. Not yet. Through the night she kept waking, each sound pulling her from sleep. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind against the shutters made her heart race. She would sit up quickly, expecting to see the soldier throwing her out. But each time he only sat by the fire, his cloak around his shoulders, watching the flames in silence. At dawn, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, she finally asked, "Do you not sleep?" The soldier glanced at her and gave a faint smile. "I sleep when the world allows it," he said, his voice calm. His answer puzzled her, but she understood one thing. He had stayed awake not for himself, but for her. The morning light filled the room, painting golden lines across the floor. The girl touched the blanket she had refused, her fingers running over its soft threads. She wondered what it would feel like to lie in warmth without fear, but fear still held her heart tight, whispering she did not deserve such things. The soldier placed bread on the table once more. He said nothing, only waited. This silence was different from the silence of the streets. It was not cold or cruel, it was patient. Giving her space to choose, she ate slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. Each bite carried both gratitude and suspicion. Why did he not demand anything in return? Why did he not fear her like the others? When she finished, she whispered, "They will come for me." The soldier met her gaze, his voice firm. "Then they will meet me first," he said. His words sent a strange warmth through her chest, stronger than the fire. For the first time, she believed she might not face the world alone. The walls of the small house seemed stronger than stone, not because of the wood or the fire, but because of the man who had opened the door. The cursed girl had stepped inside, and though her fear still whispered, hope had begun to speak louder. The truth revealed. The days passed slowly inside the small house. The alien girl began to eat more, her thin frame gaining a little strength. Though her eyes still carried shadows of fear, she spoke rarely, her words broken and soft. But the soldier listened to every sound as if it mattered. For the first time in her life, silence was not punishment, it was peace. But outside the walls, the town was restless, whispers grew sharper, Anger spread like fire in dry grass. "How can a human shelter the cursed one?" they muttered. "He will bring ruin upon us all," they warned. Neighbors watched the house with narrowed eyes, waiting for disaster to come. The soldier knew the danger. He had seen hatred gather like storm clouds in many lands. But he did not move her out, he did not tell her to hide. Instead, he watched, he waited, and he asked questions no one else dared to ask. One evening, as the fire burned low, he turned to her and said, "Tell me the truth." Her body stiffened, her hands clenched in her lap. "What truth?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "The truth of why they abandoned you," he replied. His tone steady, her eyes widened, tears threatened to spill. For years she had carried the weight of that secret, too heavy to speak, too painful to remember. She shook her head, whispering, "You will hate me too." But the soldier leaned closer, his gaze unwavering. "I will not." The girl's lips trembled, and slowly the words began to escape. "They said I was too weak to carry their future," she said, her voice cracking. "They said my body was broken, that I could not give life, that I was useless to the clan." Her chest rose and fell quickly, each word a wound reopening. "They sold me away for scraps of food, and when no one would take me, they left me on the streets." Her tears spilled freely now, her hands covering her face. "I'm not cursed by sickness. I am cursed by their cruelty," she whispered. Her body shook with sobs she had buried for too long. The soldier sat in silence, not with shock but with understanding. He had seen cruelty in war. He had seen leaders throw away soldiers like broken weapons. But to do such a thing to a child, it was something even battlefields could not justify. At last he said, "They feared not your weakness, but your strength." The girl froze, lowering her hands, her tear-streaked face searching his. "What strength?" she asked, her voice small. He nodded toward her glowing eyes, their faint light shining even through tears. "Eyes like those do not belong to the weak," he said. "You survived hunger, cold, and hatred, while others with comfort could not endure half of it. Your strength is not in what they demanded of you. It is in the life you still hold." Her breath caught, the words sinking into her heart like light breaking through clouds. No one had ever spoken of her in such a way. No one had ever named survival as strength. For so long she had believed she was broken, but now she saw her scars differently. They were not curses, they were proof. But even as hope stirred inside her, fear still lingered. "They will not see it," she whispered, "the town, my kin. They will only see a curse." The soldier's jaw tightened, his voice firm. "Then let them be blind. Your worth does not depend on their sight." The firelight flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. The girl looked at him, her tears drying slowly. In his presence, the chains of rejection began to weaken. She was not yet free, but for the first time, she believed freedom might be possible. Outside voices whispered louder than ever. Some said the soldier had been bewitched. Others claimed the cursed one was growing stronger. The fear of the unknown made their anger dangerous, and soon the storm would come to his door. But inside, the soldier and the girl sat in silence. Between them was a truth the world refused to see. She was not weak, she was not cursed. She was a survivor, and survival itself was a power her kin could never erase. That night, as she lay under the blanket she once feared to touch, she whispered to herself, "I am not broken." Her voice was small, but it was the first time she had spoken those words. The soldier heard, though he said nothing. A faint smile touched his lips because he knew the truth had finally begun to heal her. The town might rise against them. Danger might soon break the door. But he also knew this: no storm could erase the fire that had been lit in her heart. And no amount of whispers could silence the truth now spoken aloud. Forever changed, morning came heavy with tension. The girl awoke to the sound of voices outside, sharp and angry. She sat up quickly, fear rushing back into her chest. Through the cracks in the shutters, shadows moved. More than a few many feet gathered on the street. The soldier was already standing by the door, his cloak draped across his shoulders, his sword resting at his side. He had fought wars in distant lands, yet this battle felt heavier, for it was not fought with steel alone, but with hearts poisoned by fear. He looked back at her, his eyes steady. "Stay inside," he said. But she shook her head, her voice trembling. "They hate me because they do not see me if I hide. Nothing will change." The voices outside rose louder. "Come out, human," they shouted. "Send the cursed one away before ruin falls upon us all." Stones were thrown, striking the wooden walls with dull thuds. The girl flinched at each sound, her memories of rejection flooding back. But the soldier stepped forward. Opening the door wide, the crowd gasped as he appeared, his figure tall against the morning light. Behind him the girl stood small, fragile, yet refusing to shrink away this time. She clenched her hands tightly. Though her body trembled, the crowd shouted again. "She will bring death," they cried. "She is cursed. She will poison the town." Their fear was raw, but beneath it anger burned hotter. The soldier raised his hand, his voice cutting through the noise. "Enough," he said, his tone sharp as steel. The crowd fell into uneasy silence, their eyes fixed on him. He stepped aside just enough for them to see the girl clearly. "She is no curse," he declared. "She is alive, she is strong, and she is worth more than your fear." The people murmured, anger and doubt colliding. But the soldier's voice only grew firmer. "You call her weak, yet she has survived where many of you would not. You call her cursed, yet it is your hatred that poisons these streets. She is not your danger, your blindness is." His words rang out, heavy and undeniable. The girl's chest tightened, her heart pounding. Never had anyone spoken for her. Never had anyone stood before the world to shield her. Tears blurred her vision, but she held her ground. This moment was more than protection, it was belonging. One of the elders stepped forward, his voice trembling with both fear and anger. "You cannot take her in, human. She does not belong to us. She is broken." The soldier's eyes blazed as he answered. "Then she belongs to me," the crowd gasped, their whispers sharp, but the soldier did not falter. "She is family now," he said firmly, each word striking like a hammer. "And no one will take her from this home." The silence that followed was heavy. The people shifted uneasily, some lowering their eyes, others still glaring with fear, but none dared step forward against him. His conviction was stronger than their hatred, his presence more solid than their doubts. The girl's knees weakened, her body shaking. She pressed her hands against her chest as if to hold her heart together. The words echoed inside her, louder than all the cruel whispers she had ever heard. She is family now. For the first time she felt the chains of rejection break. For the first time she believed she was not alone. Her tears fell freely. But they were not only of pain, they were of release, she whispered softly, her voice carried by the wind. "You saved me. Forever." The soldier turned and gave her a faint, steady nod. No grand speech, no promise of safety he could not keep. But in his silence was truth stronger than any vow. She belonged, here and now the crowd slowly dispersed, some still muttering, some thoughtful. The storm had not ended, but it had been broken. The girl remained in the doorway, the soldier at her side. The world outside would always be harsh, but the world inside had been remade. As the sun climbed higher, light filled the small house. The girl stepped back inside, no longer afraid the door would close behind her. She touched the wooden frame, her fingers tracing its edge. This was no longer just a door. It was the border between the life she had lost and the life she had begun. The soldier placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "You are not cursed," he said quietly. "You are chosen." Her eyes widened, her heart swelling at the word. Chosen, not broken, not abandoned, chosen. That night, as the fire burned and the town fell silent once more, the girl lay on the bed she had once feared to touch, her tears dried against the pillow, her breathing steady, for the first time in her memory. She did not dream of running, she dreamed of staying. And though danger might come again, though whispers might return, the truth had been spoken and could not be erased. She was no longer the girl who slept on doorsteps. She was no longer the child cursed by lies. She was family now, forever changed by a human's choice to see what others refused to see.